My name is Glenn Palmer, and I will be discussing the effects of underrepresentation and alternative solutions to promote equity for Black students. The reason for this title and topic is due to both past, present, and current inequities Black students are facing in education. Due to administrators believing that funding is necessary to promote equity, but in reality, there is alternative solutions teachers can use to develop a classroom that generates equity and equality for all students. What inspired me to focus on this matter was due to what I learned through Catherine Cadwell's TED Talk titled "Students Need to Lead the Classroom and Not Teachers," and how it allowed me to reflect on my student experience and campus safety officer experience, plus the education that I learned from both to implement as a future teacher. In class, I learned from Catherine's talk where she described how the problem with education was that students were taught to do their work, regurgitate the knowledge, and get the grade. As a student, I discovered that I too was just playing the game of school. I was not asking questions to learn more about education, conducting research, or examining my skill sets. Instead, I was just doing the work in front of me and not making any progress in education. From realizing this, I asked myself how it came to this point in my education experience. To answer this question, I reflected on my student experience in high school and college to find the answers shown on the image you see. The Black student you see amongst the class was me, where in most classes in high school or college, I was the only Black and Mexican student. While it was not uncomfortable at first, due to more Hispanic students being present in the class, I did become more aware that Black students were underrepresented in education. The significance of noticing this in class was that education researchers such as Tia Wanzo also saw this as a concern. And in 2001, she conducted a research study on the underrepresentation for Black students in high school. In her research, Tia discovered that 50% of Black students were eligible for an advanced placement class, but due to the lack of representation, only 17% of Black students participated. The lack of participation in Black students was due to underrepresentation and classmates who portrayed educated Black students as acting white. Because of this, many Black students decided not to take an AP class as an act of resistance to the privileges unjustly afforded to the students among the class. The mistreatment and lack of representation still affects Black students to this day in 2019 and 2020. In 2019, the average National Assessment of Educational Progress posted their reading scores for an 8th grade class to show that out of white, Asian, Hispanic, and Black students were shown to have the lowest performing scores in reading, where they scored a 238 out of 270 for the state average, though the cause of low grades is accompanied by the lack of presence and challenge for Black students. In 2020, Kenneth Shores published a study article on the racial disparities among Black students and white students. In the article, he explains how Black students in a high school class received a harsher suspension at 15%, while white students received a suspension at 5%. For classification into specialized classes, Black students were placed in at 20%, while white students were placed in at 9%. Despite the research study, administrators believe that as long as all students get the same work, they are being treated both fair and equal in the class. To place equity and equality in the same category only creates superficial equity, which, defined by Shane Saphir and Jamelia Dugan in their Street Data book, is that administrators fail to take time to build equity-centered knowledge and fluency. This is because both equity and equality are not the same. As equity, by Saphir and Dugan, is described to be a high outcome for all students by removing predictability of success or failure that may correlate with any factor of race, socioeconomic status, or cultural factor. With equality, the book Becoming a Global Competent Teacher states that equality is an assumption that everyone starts on the same playing field for all of one's needs. For Black students in 2023, they are still unable to have a high outcome of success today due to the lack of representation in school. I say this due to my street data collection of information through fishbowl discussions, home visit, and equity tracker. I picked each of these tools due to my education, background, and work experience as a campus safety officer. Each of these tools has attributes that I use daily at work, which include communication, observation, and note-taking. These attributes are a part of the 2 L's that Safir and Dugan describe in street data, which is to learn and listen, and in order to seek root causes rather than use quick fixes. Along with how each tool works, I have been able to study Black students on a local, global, and national level. In each level, I learned that Black students faced loneliness on campus, no educational support globally, and a lack of national inclusion for project-based learning. At a local level on campus, I participated in a group event to meet other students and teachers. The meeting was a fishbowl discussion to describe our experiences with the school. In the group, one Black student spoke out about her experience. She explained to us how she felt intimidated to speak in class due to the lack of representation, which prevented her from discussing knowledge on the subject she studied. I acknowledged the student's response and asked a follow-up question on what she believed would improve her class. The student told me she wanted more Black teachers and topics that connected to social issues regarding the Black community. What I learned from the student was how she wanted a sense of belonging in the class, which was common among most single Black students inside the classroom and within the community. This is due to the fact that in College Factual, the site explains that the statistics of the campus diversity was that there were only 118 Black students and 27 Black teachers. In relationship to the statistics, I also learned the lack of community engagement was one of the main reasons Black students were not successful on campus. According to a written article by Brooke Straggs on why Black students aren't thriving on campus, she interviewed a Black student named Riley, only to discover that their experience was described to be isolating, lonely, and frustrating to be. The theme of isolation carried into my global street data home visit, where I had to meet and interview a Black African student named Amir. The visit was due to a concern from his teacher regarding a disturbing poem he wrote in class about harming himself, others, and his teacher. Before conducting the home visit, I learned more about Amir through my security partner. He explained to me that Amir grew up in the Congo area and was an international student who received a scholarship in 2017. He attended the campus where I worked, but Amir did not receive any educational support to help him adapt to American culture and the education system. Instead, Amir was exposed to more negative materials of American culture such as weed, alcohol, and off-campus parties. The result of the exposure of drugs and alcohol caused Amir to fail multiple classes and lose his scholarship privileges. In the interview, Amir believed that public safety was there to discriminate and harm him. He made this assumption by learning through social media and others about their dislike for authority figures. I reassured Amir that myself and my partner were concerned more about his safety and others. Once Amir realized I was not there to harm him, he apologized for his behavior and actions. From the interview with Amir, I learned that he was not a disrespectful student, but instead a student who did not have the educational support regarding his studies. What Amir needed was guidance through the basics of American culture to help him adapt to classes and the campus environment. He also needed to become familiar with campus resources for counseling and therapy so he could better express his concerns and feelings. While it was unfortunate to see the outcome for Amir, I continued my street data research on a national scale through an equity tracker, where I volunteered to examine a 4th grade science class. In the class, I did not interact with the students during my tracking, but I wrote down the name of 2 Black students to keep track of during the equity tracker, which were Ricky and Jake. Among the 2 boys there were 6 other Black students inside a classroom of 25 students. During the observation, I noted that Ricky participated often. and I recorded that he raised his hand at least 5 times out of the 6 questions asked and responded to the teacher's questions twice when chosen. For Jake, he responded only 2 times in the class but raised his hand twice. Along with the rest of the students, everyone was responsive to project-based learning. The project all the students participated in was building model cars to understand the cause of movement and force. What I learned from the equity tracker was that the classroom was both inclusive and exclusive of all learning types. Inclusive due to the students raising their hands and answering questions, but exclusive due to the less group engagement from Black students in the science project. I noted this due to certain points seeing Ricky and Jake get distracted on working in the project. Despite the small amount of diversity in the classroom, I also learned about the significance of project-based learning and how it is being used nationwide. Through research, I discovered in EduTopia that new research makes a powerful case for PBL by Yoki Tarita. And in the article, she explains how 2 tests were conducted with 6,000 students in 114 schools across the nation. From research, they learned that well-structured project-based learning can be a more equitable approach than teacher-centered learning, and that students from low-income households participate more. Even with positive results in equity tracking outside of classrooms, Black students are still facing inequalities due to school funding. In a recent article titled "Governor's Equity Multiplier Misses the Mark, Fails Black Students" by Dr. Margaret Fortune, she discusses how Gavin Newsom's budget proposal for $300 million in education funding supports low-income schools rather than low-performing schools for Black students. With these recent inequities inside and outside the class, I searched for alternative forms of representation, support, and project-based learning that teachers can use to support Black students. What I learned is that despite the lack of representation, community engagement, and inclusiveness in projects, teachers can show positive inclusion for Black students in multiple ways. In an article by Rolinda Watts titled "The 5 Strategies to Help Black Students Feel at Home in School," I found a helpful tip where teachers should learn more about their Black students through education, experiences, and interests before class. By doing so, it removes teachers' uncertainty of not knowing how to communicate with their Black students. In the case of academic support for international students, the school administration would take the initiative to promote foreign exchange programs or volunteer opportunities to assist international students. Becton Loveless, the author of "What Are the Benefits of Student Exchange Programs," explains that the self-confidence and global exposure will be beneficial for all students, as local students who are familiar with the campus can help build cultural exposure for international students to learn about on-campus habits at a faster pace. This will improve relationships and build stronger connections among students. Before I discovered all this new information, I was like many of the adults and teachers who just assumed that students who received the same work was equal and fair to all students. After using street data, I learned through personal, student, and in-class discussions that teachers can do more to promote equity and equality in the classroom, either by ensuring the high outcomes are possible by removing the predictability of success and failure, ensuring resources are provided, and incorporating all learning types in the classroom. While I still have more to learn in my journey to become a teacher, the last thing I would want is for any student, regardless of ethnicity, gender, or background, to feel alone, underrepresented, and unsupported in their journey of education. To eliminate these feelings, I understand that I must start at the same level of all learning experiences for students, through the use of symphonic thinking. To do this, I must lead a diverse group of students who have different levels of knowledge in various subjects, because despite our differences in knowledge, we all share an equitable goal, which is to learn about the subject in class together through distribution of personal knowledge and text information in order to make contributions towards knowledge on a worldwide scale. The purpose of these contributions is so that all students can succeed both academically and in life after school. And with that said, this concludes my discussion on the inequities and alternative solutions to promote equity for Black students. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment down below. Thank you.